There are so many different positions. I mean, there's missionary... Oh, we're talking about football positions? Today, for all you mouth breathers, we are continuing with Football Bootcamp. Now, I know this is some pretty thrilling news, but hold your excitement. And please, keep your helmet strapped on throughout the entire video this time. A few of you overexcited viewers hurt yourself last week trying to keep up with all that talk of pitches. And frankly, we can't afford to lose any more of you. We're going to be comparing football, that's soccer to my American audience, to popular sports that those of us in the US are more familiar with, like hockey and baseball. If you were hoping to hear some comparisons to real football this week, you'd have better chances of seeing the Detroit Lions win the Super Bowl. For this lesson in Football Bootcamp, we're talking positions, but don't be intimidated. While football positions can get a bit more abstract than what we're used to over here in the States, they're really not too far removed from what we know. However, if your sports knowledge comes exclusively from American football, this is going to be more difficult than teaching fluid dynamics to an ape. Similar to every other team sport, football teams are made up of a collection of various players. While most sports refer to this conglomerate of players as a roster, in football, it's referred to as a squad, because they're cool like that. Each team's squad contains 25 active players. Of those 25 players, 11 have the honor of being named the starters, aka the good ones. In football, there are many different positions. Why are sports so suggestive? But just like hockey, those 11 players make up both the offense and defense, with some players specializing in one side of the pitch over the other. To better organize the many positions in football, each one is categorized into one of the following 4 groups: goalies, midfielders, defenders, and forwards. The best common American sport to compare these different positions to is baseball. Yeah, you heard that correctly. In baseball, you have catchers, pitchers, outfielders, and infielders. But us gun-loving Americans know that infield is not a position. It's a spot on the field. Infielders are really made up of first baseman, shortstop, second baseman, and third baseman. Sorry. I meant to say third base person. Well, guess what? Football is the exact same way. The big difference here is that football might not have one of every position, but frankly, anyone who was raised on baseball, hockey, and basketball is not ready for this level of critical thinking. For once though, I think that the American football fans might actually have an advantage over everybody else. Forwards are like forwards, but not forwards, you dingus. They can be broken down into 3 different groups: strikers, center forwards, and wingers. A winger is a forward that plays either on the left or the right side of the pitch. They're basically the Sisyphus of soccer positions, doomed for all eternity to push the defense back while simultaneously getting the ball upfield into the center to the attacker, who will ultimately let them down by not scoring given the opportunity to.
Jesus! Sterling! Oh! How has that happened?
In the forward of every attack is either a striker or a center forward. But Kevin, what's the difference? Well, basically they're interchangeable, but picking which one a team will use really depends on the strengths and strategies they want to use. And similar to a frat boy, the main objective of a striker is to score. Center forwards, on the other hand, play a similar role. But unlike a striker, who plays upfield, doing a brunt of the pushing for their team, a center forward is basically our cherry picker, and they play pretty close to the midfield. If a team does opt to use a center forward over a striker, it would result in the wingers having to do a majority of the pushing for their team, allowing the center forward to strut on in for some sloppy seconds. If forwards are the farms, then midfielders are the big city of positions. By far, they have the most diversity of all the different groups. There are right mids, left mids, center mids, attacking mids, and defensive mids. Shockingly, left and right mids are basically the same thing, except they play on opposite sides of the pitch. Their primary job is to control the spacing of the team, while also acting as passing lanes from the defense to the wingers. Center mids, on the other hand, are the workhorse of the team, and unfortunately if they go down, it's off to the glue factory. When their team has the ball, they act as passers, pushers, and initiators. But when their team is on defense, they switch sides faster than Italy did in World War II and try to break up any attacks. Center mids are often super talented and do more running than Alaskan sled dogs do. And then lastly, we have an attacking mid and a defending mid. And if you can't figure out what those positions do, you should probably be in the glue factory too. For those of you who are confused, very likely are American football fans, an attacking mid is, get this, a midfielder who specializes in a more offensive role. So what's the difference then between a center forward and an attacking mid? Who knows? I believe this means that a defensive mid is pretty self-explanatory then. Defensive positions can be broken up into 4 different types: center backs, left and right backs, wing backs, and the panda position, sweepers. They're like pandas because they're almost extinct. Center backs are the heart of a team's defense, acting as the last line of defense before you get to the goalie. If you get past these brutes, The goalie is likely sweating bullets at that point. They rarely push up too far up the field, even during a strong attack, because if the counter is on, they have to do their damnedest to hold that door. Left and right backs are essentially the rock for our Sisyphus wingers. They basically keep the wingers in check by pestering them and bullying them throughout the entire match. And now that we know what center backs are and left and right backs are, picture wingbacks as their child with a major identity crisis. If a team decides that defense really isn't all that important, then they may decide instead of going with 2 center backs, they're only going to use 1. Lord help that poor center back. A wingback pretty much acts as a hybrid between a center back and either a left or a right back. This position is utterly exhausting and requires more effort than it takes my fiance to pick out an outfit for dinner. Lastly, we have our near extinct position, the sweeper. They really aren't a part of the modern game anymore because this position is pretty much useless. However, it used to be an extra defender that played behind the defensive line as kind of like an aid to our goalie. Nowadays, they decided that they were just going to use more talented center backs. Finally, we have our anchor, our backbone, the friend who initiates all conversations with their other friend over text, even though friendship is supposed to be a two-way street, our goalie. Fun fact, goalies aren't actually called goalies. They're technically called goalkeepers. It's also funny because I wonder how many of you keyboard warriors were just sitting at the edge of your seat, ready to correct me about that too. A goalie is a special defensive position. Picture the libero of a football team. Hey, a volleyball reference. They stay back in the goal area and are permitted to use their hands or any part of their body to stop a ball from entering the net.
Ready for round 2. And Shaw takes a moment. Here he goes with the approach. Oh!
And I'm just sure that there's some numbskull out there thinking to themselves what a smart idea they have. Why not just use all the positions and stuff the team's goal with a bunch of goalies? Unfortunately, you're not that smart, because each team is only permitted to have 1 goalie on the field at a time. To untrained fans, it might seem like all goals are really the goalie's fault, but frankly, that's just not true. Are all home runs the pitcher's fault? Okay, bad example. Hopefully now you understand the importance of the different positions. Next video will likely be the last video of our crash course into the basics of football. Unless you have any special requests or rules that you'd like me to go over. If that's the case, just keep it to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. Let me know down in the comment section below, and maybe I'll check it out. And remember guys, Scott Sterling can do no wrong.
Sterling is sitting. There is no possible way that North Carolina can mess up this shot. Oh!